The Innovation Law Lab announced today that they are representing two more asylum seekers who were arrested at Portland Immigration Court. Can you just quickly kind of summarize what we know about these cases and what your role is in this now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think as some of your viewers know, the ICE is continuing this unlawful tactic of moving to close people's pending asylum cases before the Portland Immigration Court in an effort to then arrest them immediately and put them in a form of rapid deportation proceedings called expedited removal, in which people have very few rights to pursue their asylum claim. So this happened twice last week in Portland for the first time locally. And unfortunately, today it happened again, and two men were arrested. We were able to intervene quickly thanks to a cadre of community lawyers and legal observers who were there and file habeas petitions on both of these men's behalf. And luckily, the court intervened very quickly to prevent their transfer out of the state of Oregon, and both of the men were released.
And I know that you have filed very similar claims for two individuals who were arrested last week at Portland Immigration Court after scheduled hearings related to their asylum claims. So, can you give me an update on how those two cases are doing from last week? Because there's just been a few more days for ICE to respond and for the judge to consider them. So, where do those cases stand now?
Certainly. Yeah. So our two clients from last week, OJM and YZLH, are unfortunately still detained at the Northwest Processing Center in Tacoma. OJM, we're particularly concerned about. She's a transgender woman. She's being held in solitary for her own protection because this administration refuses to recognize her right to be held with other women for her own safety. We filed a motion for bail with the federal judge in her case, asking the judge to release her because of the illegality of ICE's actions and the urgency that she's in because of her continued detention. And we plan to do the same for YZLH shortly. So as of now, those cases are still being litigated.
And I did see that in ICE's response to your habeas petition, that they explained the expedited removal process, and they explained specifically that the Secretary of DHS, Kristi Noem, has unfettered access or unfettered ability rather to modify the standards for expedited removal. What is your response to that claim from ICE?
So no government official has unfettered discretion to do anything because due process is always the limitation on that. So once these people had already entered into a process that ICE chose for them, ICE chose to place them in removal proceedings before the immigration court, and they've pursued asylum there. Their discretion is not unfettered to yank them out of that process in a bait and switch, excuse me, just to be able to deport them more rapidly because that's the president's whim.
And I know that you and Innovation Law Lab have noted that several of these kinds of arrests have occurred in other cities other than Portland. Do you know where those cases may stand? Because I can imagine there are similar arguments about the ability of DHS and ICE to modify the criteria or the circumstances for expedited removal. Similar battles are now happening here that you are in. So how is this case or these cases in Portland playing out in comparison to the other cases across the US?
That's a great question. I think, unfortunately, in a lot of these circumstances, people aren't able to access counsel quickly enough to file a challenge. So while I can't quote any specifics, I know many people have been detained and ripped away from their families and communities super rapidly because of this tactic. We're lucky here in Portland that we have an overwhelming community response that was able to intervene quickly, make an action plan ahead of time, and then intervene in a timely manner with the federal court, which has enabled there to be jurisdiction in Oregon, for there to be orders releasing the two people who are arrested today, and hopefully for continued federal court intervention for all four of them.
You mentioned that you became aware of today's two arrests because of a community or because of a group of organizations that are kind of involved in observing what happens at court and things like that. Can you just kind of go more into what organizations are in place to kind of observe what ICE and other federal agencies do in immigration court?
Certainly. So through Equity Corps of Oregon, which is Oregon's statewide representation program, in connection with a network of community-based volunteers, there's legal observers at the Portland Immigration Court every day, and there have been ever since we knew this tactic was about to be rolled out. Equity Court also provides immigration attorneys who go to court every day to advocate for people whose hearings are before the Portland Immigration Court. And since we became aware of this tactic, those attorneys have been trained and highly on the lookout to intervene in this exact specific scenario.
Do you know if any of the four individuals, the two who were arrested last week and the two who were arrested today, do you know if any of them have criminal records?
From what we understand, no, they've complied with all that has been asked of them, coming here to seek asylum in the United States, including respecting the laws of the United States and also the extremely complex asylum process that they've been placed into.
At this point, I know that the ICE has responded to your challenge of their detainment for last week's two arrests, and they've submitted, or at least for one of the cases, they've submitted a response. What's next in these cases? Is the judge considering kind of what to do next, or is there a hearing coming up? What can we look forward to?
So as I noted, we filed a motion for bail in OJM's case, and we plan to do so shortly in the other case for our other client who remains detained. So that's before the judge, and we hope the judge will set a hearing soon.
Will you be filing similar motions for bail if you find out that the two folks who were arrested today end up in the Tacoma facility?
Certainly. Yeah, luckily they were able to go home to their families and communities tonight, but if those circumstances change, we would be advocating for their release as well.
That's one thing I want to clarify because I missed it earlier. So the two folks who were arrested today, have they been released?
They were released on their own recognizance, yes. So the federal judge was able to intervene to prevent their transfer out of the state of Oregon. And once ICE received that order, they took the time, relooked at the case, and revisited the initial decision they'd made to release these men. They had initially found that they were neither a danger nor a flight risk and released them to the community without any problems. And so we're grateful that with the federal court's intervention, ICE then released them again today.
While your legal challenge of their detainment goes on for all four of these individuals, while you challenge their detainment, can they still seek asylum or is that process halted in the meantime?
So what ICE's tactic has done is basically short-circuited their ability to proceed with their asylum claims in the United States. So they were proceeding before an immigration judge where they had a right to present evidence, a right to full representation by an attorney, a right to appeal an adverse decision. Now, ICE is attempting to place them in something called expedited removal, in which they have a very narrow opportunity to seek asylum through something called a credible fear interview. Because that happens from detention, it's extremely difficult to articulate a claim in a way that prevails, and the right to present evidence and to representation is much more curtailed.
All the questions I have there. Any other thoughts that you have on these situations as they're unfolding?
Only just that we're so grateful that the federal courts are intervening to protect due process for not only these clients, but for all of us. That really wouldn't have been possible without the community's outrage and response to this egregious situation. The volunteer legal observers, attorneys, and protesters are making these quick interventions possible, and our clients are really grateful for the community action here.